Hi again, everybody, and welcome to the Pirate People podcast from North Central Missouri College's Pirates Digital Media. I am Rick Cole, and our guest today is sophomore student Jaden Varner. Jaden is a member of our media and broadcast club, as well as a year under his belt as a play-by-play announcer for Pirate Athletics. He will be handling a lot of the play-by-play here in his second year. We thought it'd be a good time for you to meet Jaden Varner on the Pirate People podcast. Jaden, welcome to the Pirate People podcast, and you were very familiar to me. Obviously, you're my right-hand guy in our broadcast productions. Tell me a little bit about your first year here at North Central, your responsibilities on the broadcast, and your experiences and you can tell the whole honest truth. You can just say whatever you want.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be here. And my first year was kind of interesting because, first of all, I didn't even know about the program when I first started. I only got lucky because I ran into you at the coffee shop downstairs.
Yeah,
and
we just started having a conversation.
I just started having a conversation, and so that was kind of a crazy whole thing in itself. And then I was like, yeah, I'm pretty interested in doing this stuff. And then you were like, well, I could get you, on air. We could start doing it like right away. And so I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then we got to that first game. You were in, what was it, Hawaii somewhere on vacation?
Yeah,
so,
the time I nearly drowned, yeah. It sticks out.
So we kind of had a little bit of a rushed sequence to get that to the game beforehand. But getting that first practice in, I could tell I was very nervous at the beginning. It was a bit rough. But, I was like, now, luckily we had that first crew there. Lindsay was pretty helpful, just being nice and like, hey, it's not that bad, promise. And then, obviously, Adrian was there, too. He's a pretty cool guy. I was very thankful to work with them because Lindsay was the only, returner that year?
Yeah, she was our top person.
She had to, because then she was supposed to work that first game as director, and she ended up being late for some reason. You're like, hey, guess what, Jayden? You're going to be director. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And you're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
So we went through a quick 5-minute rundown before that. And I think I did all right. I don't know. I still have never gone back and watched that first game.
Right. Was that your first time on the air doing anything?
Yeah, that was the first time I've ever done anything at all.
Do you remember what I told you after the game?
I can remember you telling me, you just sometimes you had to learn to talk more and not just be silent because I
was not that kind. Do you remember I told you, and I did it for a reason, which I'll explain in a moment, I said, that was awful.
Yeah,
you remember me saying that?
Yeah, because you were like, that's the worst performance you'll ever have.
That's exactly right.
And you're like,
and that was my point, is that is the worst performance you'd ever have.
Yeah.
It certainly was last year, and it's a good story, I think, in a way, because you certainly improved a lot in a short amount of time. I mean, you exceeded expectations and really became very good very fast.
Yeah, because I know we definitely wanted to strive for putting the pressure on early because I had played sports my whole life, and so I was kind of used to the whole idea of, coaches got to put pressure on you because that's the only way you make a diamond. You got to add pressure to it, and it's either gonna break or you're gonna succeed. And so I think in the way that we started doing stuff last year was perfect for me because it just was something I was so used to, and getting that pressure on and just going out there doing stuff because I'm one of those people that I have to be doing it in order to learn better, be more focused in it instead of all right, here's what you're supposed to do, and I'm just going to tell you how to do it kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. At North Central, we're fortunate that we're not a big school. We're not a 4-year school because at 4-year schools, if somebody wants to be an announcer, they are going to sit on the bench and not do much the first 2 or 3 years. And then their 4th year, if they're lucky, they'll get to do some. And like you said, I think you had the very first play-by-play game of our season because we just threw you out there. Yeah. And there is no other substitute for the experience. I don't know. And I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much. And like you said, we had me out there pretty much immediately. Yeah. And it was, in my opinion, it was better for me because had you just let me watch, I probably would not have made the improvements I did the way throughout the year. I think if I had just watched, I probably would have still been nervous and unfocused throughout the whole time, but kind of threw me out there to the wolves kind of thing. And my whole life's kind of been like that. My mom has stories of stuff that we used to do when I was little that she would just kind of be like, well, you got to learn somehow, so we just throw you out there, you got to do it. And so, that's how I learned to swim. You just throw you out there in a pond and you'll figure it out at some point. So
well, it's a tribute to you that you did it, because other people have tried it and not been as successful. So it's a tribute to you. You have a favorite moment from last year, from any of the games, whether it was your announcing moment or just something that happened in the game?
I think my favorite moment was getting to call a Brookfield game in general. I mean,
oh, that was during Holiday Hoops?
During Holiday Hoops. It was one of the games. I didn't think they were going to be there because I don't remember them ever going to Holiday Hoops, I think, the entire time I was in high school. So, and that was kind of a dream of mine. I was like, oh, it would be so cool to call one of my old high school games. And then saw the schedule for Holiday Hoops and it said they were going up there, and I was like, oh, I got to do that game.
Yeah.
And in that game, one of the kids that I went to high school with, he's a couple grades younger than me. He's a senior now, which blows my mind because I still see him as this, kid freshman there. But he hit a half-court shot with 2 seconds left in the half, and it was crazy.
I don't remember that at all.
It blew my mind seeing it because I didn't expect it to go in. He just heaved. It was probably... Yeah. It was longer than a half-court shot. I think he was sitting just past the 3-point line on the other side, and he made it. So it was a big moment. That was probably the coolest moment from last year, the games I called.
I'm going to go back and correct you about your first time on the air because, and this takes us back before we even met, we here at North Central were helping out one year Trenton High School. It was the year after COVID, and we were broadcasting their home football games for them. And their very first game was against
Brookfield. Yeah.
And you were playing.
Yeah.
Were you number 53?
54.
54, okay. Yeah. So you and I went back and we looked, and there you were.
Yeah, there I was.
And who knew that a year later you'd be actually behind the mic? Or was it 2 years later? 2 years later. Whatever it was.
It was a year later because that was my senior year because that's when we beat Trenton 50-0. It was a blowout.
Yeah. Brookfield, tell me about that. What was your experience like at Brookfield?
Well, for the most part, pretty much like every small town school, you had your grade pretty much was all your buddies. That was all your friends. You didn't really meander past the grades below you, the grades above you, but you was all really much a family. And of course, I had my specific group because I played football from 3rd grade up until I graduated. And so I had the same 20-something guys that we had on our football team every year. And, kind of going through those and playing football. Obviously, our teams were very good. I think we won a total of 6 games in the first 3 years of playing. We weren't good at all. I hate to throw it out at our coach, but I think it might have been some of our coaching that was just, not stellar because we had the teams and stuff. But yeah, then my senior year we won 5 games. We went to Lawson, or no, we didn't go to Lawson. Lawson came to us because it was the first time we'd had a home playoff game in like 8 years to that point. And I don't know that we've had much luck in playoffs at all. We've never won state, so it was kind of cool to have a home playoff game like that. And we ended up turbo clocking Lawson. I think we scored 57 points in that game. So it was pretty cool. First home playoff game, and you turbo clock your opponent. And then we go on to St. Pius the next week, and I think we lost 21-6. But that game we complained about that game a lot between me and my buddies because I think the running back at the time, his name was Trace, had 2 60-plus yard touchdown runs that got called back to holdings.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, I remember being pretty angry at the refs after that game. And
it wasn't you, was it? It wasn't holding on 54.
No, it was not. I made sure I never held. So.
Yeah. Never ever?
Never ever.
Come on.
I mean, there's holding on every play. I mean, but to a degree, there wasn't anything that was like, oh, this is overly holding.
Right. Overly holding.
Overly holding.
Yeah.
That's what they should call the penalties. He was really overly holding because there's holding
really on every play. On every play. Your friends there, what are they all doing now? Are any of them sports broadcasters?
No, I was quite the kind of the unicorn in the bunch of the horses kind of thing. Everybody was like, oh, I might be a welder, or I'm going to go play football somewhere else. And I'm like, I want to do sports broadcasting. And I was just kind of like, that's different for this area because usually, small town Missouri, everybody goes to be a welder. They go do building trades. They go do, play sports somewhere else. But then kind of me being different, I was like, I'm going to go do sports stuff like this. Yeah. And everybody kind of... in a way, I didn't think everybody would find it as cool as they did. They were like, "Wow, that's pretty cool. We hope that we hope to see you on TV one day like that." So, most of my buddies and stuff, I know that most of my group, they all went to Missouri Valley to continue their sports. Trace, the running back I had talked about earlier, he went to go play. I think he's a middle linebacker for the Vikings right now.
Oh.
And then my other friend Dawson is last I checked, he was the long snapper, but I think he was playing defensive end this year, so that's pretty cool.
Is Missouri Valley in football still as dominant as they once were? Because they were, when I was in that conference as a broadcaster, they were big time.
I don't know anything as of right now as how dominant they are. I haven't talked to some of those guys a little bit, but I don't know.
That's what websites are good for. I'll go check it later.
Yeah, that's what website. Although knowing what the websites we deal with half the time,
yeah,
you can never
we won't go there. I think people should know that you're going to be doing a lot of our sports this year, play-by-play, including our first 2 basketball games of the season. What are you anticipating here in your sophomore year?
Well, last year was a lot of trial and error type stuff, just like, okay, this worked, this didn't type thing. And so I think for this year, my goal is to kind of refine the skills that I've learned based off of last year, and like the whole being fluid on camera, being the more on the mic where it's like I don't freeze, I don't just randomly go or there's a pause for like 5 seconds. So just refining more of the skills during the game and maybe having more information to build up off of, because last year that was kind of my problem. I went through my information within the first 2 quarters of the game, and so it was like
it's all experience.
Yeah, and so I think just having that prior knowledge now going into this year, I think that I'll be a lot better off with knowing how much information I can have. You can never have too much information, which is something you always told me. I think every single game we had last year was like, never can have too much information.
No.
So,
and always save some back.
Yeah, and always save some back, because if games go into overtime and you just used all of it like to barely, you're like, you're scrounging around for something to go off of.
Right.
And so I think that's my main goal, is just to make sure I'm more fluid and having enough information to keep on going through the game, even if there is overtime.
Yeah, right. This summer, tell me a little bit about what you did over the summer.
Well, during the summer, I got a job at a manufacturing for yearbooks at Walsworth, which kind of didn't know that's what I was going to be doing this summer, but I got that job. And then I got a job at the radio station in Chillicothe called KCHI, and pretty grateful for that job, actually, because it helped me in a lot more ways than I thought it would, because being on a radio station that is live to everyone for that second that you're talking on air, and you can't really afford to freeze on air on that, because if someone hears a break on the radio, they're just like, what happened? What's going on? So I think being able to come up with stuff on the fly was a big deal for that, because you have to kind of, when you're talking, because you can just say, go on there every hour and be like, oh, this is the weather for this hour, and just be like, sound like a robot. But I think it seems more of like a personal, if you're like, oh, okay, here's the weather and blah, 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 say something.
Yeah, conversational.
Yeah, conversational, because in a weird way, it almost is like you're talking to the people on the other side of the radio, even though they're not answering you. You have no idea if anyone's listening, but
that's exactly right.
You just got to act like you're having a conversation with somebody, and it seems more of like an upbeat, because if I go on there like, and it's blah, blah, blah today, it seems like, oh, this dude's just monotone. He's a robot over there. So I think doing that radio station really helped me. And, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, because it's just like, oh, radio station, that's a little, stressful. Not really as bad as I thought, but, I'm pretty grateful for having that job.
Well, you talked about the dead air, and that's so interesting to me, because if you're on radio, you can't have dead air, because there's nothing else.
Yeah, there's nothing else there to.
If you're doing video, if you're doing TV, the camera at least is still on, and people, can gather, and probably in some cases prefer just to have that. But radio, the dead air thing was a huge deal when I started in the late '70s in radio in my hometown, and I still hear 45 years later. Or more now, but I still have nightmares about getting locked in the restroom when the record runs out. And we did play records in that day. Just stuff like that. Getting locked out of the control room while I went to check the teletype, if you can believe it or not. Those are just, I still have those nightmares today.
Just that.
So it's, I think radio is a great experience, and I miss radio. But it's never going to be the same way it was when I was starting out. because of the animation and stuff. KCHI is one of the few stations I know that does. I don't think they do much animation, if any.
Yeah, not really.
Automation,
it's pretty much. Other than we have to record weather for evenings and stuff, but for the most part, you're there. You're doing all the talking. You hear is either ads or it's the person at the station, which I think, in all honesty, that was probably one of the different things than I was expecting, because you hear all these other bigger radio stations, it's mostly automated. Like
Absolutely.
It's half the time there's not a person there during the week. But the cool thing about KCHI is that we have so many different people that go in there all the time that you just get this different kind of variation of who there is. We have a person there that just knows all this stuff about music, so they'll have songs and stuff that they love that they'll be like, oh, here's Linkin Park and blah blah blah. They know all the facts about that song, and a lot of people enjoy that. And then we have people that know random history facts that go along with what that song was going on during the era that song was written. And so kind of finding a good balance between all that and what other people like, kind of what your identity is. That's a big thing in radio, is that you kind of want to the other people have their own thing. What's your thing? And so
that's interesting.
And
I would have loved to have been a disc jockey if we had internet, so I could look up facts on groups. And we just did it strictly from memory. And a lot of times my memories, I was 15, 16 years old. I didn't have the right memories. I didn't have as much stuff that I'd come across. For instance, you won't relate to this, but maybe some older people will. I just kind of used The Who as the same thing as the Guess Who, and I didn't know there was a difference. So I mean, you old people know what I'm talking about. So anyway, I said a lot of stupid things when I was 16. So I hope you didn't make those mistakes.
Now, luckily,
but you would have at some point.
Yeah, we probably would have. But luckily, we have a computer screen that just is so convenient. They're like, oh well, this song's going on. Let me just type on what's going on there.
Neat.
There was one song that I was for sure came out in 2010. I was like, yeah, this song came out in 2010. I got to look it up. It came out in 2009. I'm an idiot.
Right. Right. Yeah, we used to read the labels on the 45s, and those were just the dates they were probably published. I don't know. So, yeah. Patty Leatherman is the general manager there, and she's quite a lady. She's a very good person.
Yeah, I remember going in for the interview to go do that, and she was just such a kind lady, and she was just, we're very flexible. We'd appreciate to have you here, because we just, we love seeing what other people can bring in for our station. What can they do differently than what we don't already have. So that was kind of a big thing going into that interview, knowing that I have quite a bit of free range to do, because they told me my first day there that when I was training, they're like, pretty much, I mean, just you got to read the ads daily that, top of the hour, say, that you're listening to KCHI and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then, but other than that, the whole show is yours. You can stop in after every song and say blah blah blah, something crazy.
I'm telling you, that's very rare in today's radio. You don't get that kind of freedom. You certainly wouldn't get that kind of freedom if you're working in downtown Kansas City or a major market. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad you had a good experience with that.
Yeah,
are you ready to start your own radio station here on campus?
Yeah, kind of. After doing that whole radio station deal, I'm kind of like, hey, not big deal, bad idea there.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. You mentioned your family a little bit ago. Can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Yeah, so my family, they're doing pretty good. My mom is a teacher in Keatsville, and she's kind of bounced around from different schools. She started out going to Marceline. That's where she's from, and so she got a job there. She's an English teacher, so I know a lot of absurd, random language arts.
That's great for announcers, though.
It is great.
You got to have that.
Yeah, so she enjoys teaching, although it has very much changed since the time she started until now. And so she went from Marceline, which is a bigger school, then she went to Brookfield, which is where I ended up going when I started school. And Marceline and Brookfield about the same size. And then she went to a big school in Carrollton and was like, she loved the people there, but she was like, it's just such a big school. I don't know if I can do it. And then she went to Keatsville, which I think the entire town is like 100-something people. So each class is like 8 kids, so she enjoys it. She knows all of them on a personal level.
Sure, of course.
And of course, my little brother, who, despite my best efforts, is getting older. He is now a freshman in high school, which blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that didn't see him all that long ago. He was a little baby, just running around the house, but he's in high school now, and he hates that I left home and now I'm here. So every time I come home during the weekend, why did you leave me here?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then it's always funny because I get the random text like, I hate you that you left. And I come back. I know him. He's the polar opposite of me. I'm more of the calm, think things through. He's the on his feet thinking about it right now. It's I think if he got into business, he'd be a genius.
Wow. Okay.
He definitely. He's also a smooth talker. I remember one time a story. He was in 3rd grade, and he was mouthing off to a kid or something, and teacher goes to call the principal, and he's the whole time he's sitting there sweet talking the teacher to get. And I think that is the funniest story, because the next day in school, the teacher that he had ran into me at the cafeteria that next day and was telling me about how my brother was sweet talking her out of getting out of the principal. And she was like, it almost worked, but luckily the principal wasn't there that day, so he didn't go anyway.
Wow.
But I think that was probably the funniest story I've ever had from a teacher to come up and tell me that. Like, she sought me out to go tell me that story.
That's a good story, though.
It is hilarious. I thought, and we tease him all the time about that. He hates it. But we're like, hey, you did it, man. We're going to tease you about it all the time.
Yep. You're always accountable for your actions, right? Yeah.
And then my dad, he's he works at an automotive place up there in Brookfield, and he really kind of taught me a lot of stuff I do. Me and him have a lot of the same mannerisms. We're pretty much identical copies of each other. And I thank him for a lot of my work ethic that I go through, because his parents got divorced when he was pretty much a young age. So there's a lot of stuff that he did that was just like, I got to be responsible pretty quick. And so I attribute to a lot of the stuff that I do now to him, because he was a very loving father that his dad never really was. He showed it in a different way.
Right.
But like my dad told us, he told me and my brother, he loved us pretty much every day before we go to school.
Fantastic.
So yeah, but I attribute to a lot of stuff that I do now to him, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, it sounds like a good dude.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. Last but certainly not least, you have started your own podcast.
I have.
And that's why you're so smooth on this one, I think, is because you've got that experience. Tell us, first, starting with the title, tell us all about your podcast. Where can we hear it? What's it about? All of that.
Well, so far it's just on YouTube, and it's called the Chiefs Podcast Network. And really, I had been thinking about
Native Americans?
No, it's about the football team, of course.
Football team,
yes,
gotcha. Okay.
About your rival Broncos. Yeah, they're in that same division.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that right now.
But yeah, I had kind of wanted to start an NFL podcast since I was like a junior in high school, and I just kept pushing it off, and I was like, no, I don't have the cool microphone, I don't have anything to do that. But then a couple buddies that I met online through a sports app, and I've become great friends with them and stuff, and they're like, nah, dude, you need to start a podcast.
Right.
Like, we'll join you for it. And so randomly during the summer, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to start it. So I made the YouTube channel, and then I sat there for about 2 weeks like, how do I start this thing? And so, I got 3 other guys on this podcast, and we got to talking, and I think the first episode technically got lost because the way I recorded it through an app that you couldn't hear the other 3 guys at all. So
really?
The first episode technically was an hour and a half long, and that doesn't exist anymore. So we then recorded another one a couple weeks later that it's just 30 minutes, but it was a pretty fun experience. I got my laptop, and I just have this little microphone that's I think was $30.
You don't really need much.
I was kind of surprised because like the whole time I was saying like, oh, I gotta have a whole board over here. I gotta have a whole volume thing, a microphone. Gotta have something. It was like just a computer and a microphone, and that's kind of where I went. And I think so far we've got 5 episodes. I just recorded one last night for the upcoming game against the Raiders. It's only I think it's 6-7 minutes long. It's just a little preview. But yeah, I've had quite a bit of fun doing it. It's been a different experience to be able to talk about something I love so deeply, and other people can listen to it. So
right.
It's a pretty fun thing.
Okay, I'm going to ask you some Chiefs questions. I want your reaction. Okay.
Okay.
First, the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL.
Best team in the NFL? Well, probably not as of right now, because I don't want to be like, oh yeah, we're the best team out there. But I think right now, ahead of them, I'd still put probably the Bills. Talent-wise, they definitely have more out there. But the thing the Chiefs have that the other teams don't is Andy Reid. And quite literally, that is a lot of the times. That's why we beat the Bills sometimes, even though Sean McDermott's off the Reid coaching tree.
Yeah, he
still sometimes has a lot to learn from his old master Andy Reid.
Right,
and so I think that's a lot of the times that we get labeled better than them because our coaching just is just above that.
Right. And
so talent-wise, I think the team we have this year, the defense they've surprised me a lot. Our first-round pick, George Karlaftis, he's got a high motor. He hasn't got a sack yet, but it's coming soon.
He's contributing.
Yeah, he's big time. And then our rookie first-round corner, he hasn't played since the first game. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury, but the first half that he played against the Cardinals, he didn't get targeted once.
Right.
So they were afraid to throw to him. But our defense is 5th in rushing right now, so they've definitely stepped up compared to where they were last year. And I'm thinking, if you ask me that same question toward the end of the year, I'll probably be like, yeah, we're probably the best team out there.
Well, you gotta prove it all the way through.
Yeah, got to prove it all the way.
Second question is, Butker hurt first game. Reed comes on, the safety, to kick a couple of times. Then they sign a legitimate, quote-unquote, kicker. That doesn't work out so good. They sign a second legitimate kicker. Why didn't they just stick with Reed?
That's kind of what I'm thinking, because I'm like, there's the pros of it. It's like, if you have him on kickoff, I mean, he's a safety.
What a great, last line of defense.
Last line of defense back there. So I was like thinking, at least just have him on kickoff, because that's a great last line. That's perfect. Field goals, I'm like, okay, maybe you can kind of kick him out there. Maybe. It was like, but shoot, just go for 2 every time. That'll work.
Yeah.
But, I think this new guy that they got, Matthew Wright, seems to be a lot better than Amendola, because he was on the Jags last year, but he showed he was a good kicker before he was released. But the Amendola guy we got was already questionable before anything. So.
Well, they were in a desperate
situation
if they needed to make the change, which I guess they felt they had to. Butker back this week?
No, he's still out of practice. That ankle injury still hindering. But what I think was cool is that he got hurt in that Cardinals game, and then he came back and kicked a 54-yard field goal off of 1 foot. He took one step.
Yes, I agree.
That was by far probably the coolest thing I've watched. The fact that he trotted out there, took 1 step, and booted this thing 54 yards. It almost makes you think, how much is that running forward stuff just cut?
Well, you see, because you mentioned earlier, I'm a Denver fan, their kickoff guy easily kicks it in the end zone. He just takes 1 step on the kickoff. So I know it's a little different. But all right, final question about the Chiefs for the expert that has a Chiefs podcast. Patrick Mahomes, what's wrong with him? He's not as good as he was even in his second year. True or false?
Well, the difference is he doesn't have the cheetah out there that can get open and.
The cheetah.
Yeah, I did that.
Just another high-priced diva.
Just another high-priced diva. That was
he's talented.
Yeah, he's not having him out there is a little bit different, but I think this year he's done pretty well so far he's got 4 brand new receivers that he didn't have last year, learning the system, and Andy Reid's offense is kind of hard to grasp if you've not been in there a little bit. So I think so far the receivers that he's got, he's making the most. Of course, Travis Kelce's wide receiver, tight end 1.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's a lot of.
He's a freak.
He's a freak. Yeah, he's probably the best tight end in the league right now. Some can argue George Kittle, but it's
6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, pretty much. So, and I've been pretty fortunate for Chiefs fans to have gone from Tony Gonzalez to Travis Kelce within the span of 10-something years. So, it's been pretty cool to watch the fact that we've had a tight end as good as Travis Kelce. I almost don't want to imagine life without Travis Kelce.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty and the ugly part of the NFL. It's not for long, that's for sure. Hey, tell us again the name of your podcast.
The Chiefs Podcast Network. You can find it on YouTube. Still trying to figure out how to put it on Spotify, but once I figure that out, it'll be there too.
Fantastic. Hey, congratulations. Look forward to hearing your play-by-play this year on Pirates Digital Media. And that first game is what, October 25?
Yep, October 25th.
All right. You'll have the play-by-play for that. Jaden Varner, our guest here on the Pirate People Podcast. Thank you for listening today to the Pirate People Podcast. We'll have another podcast for you next week. Today's guest, Jaden Varner, is a sophomore here at North Central Missouri College and big part of our broadcast team. I am Rick Cole. Until next time, we say goodbye and go Pirates.